let's just start with the Islamic Republic that's in Iran now. Okay, so this regime comes to power in 1979 through a revolution. And once this regime is established, it tells us that its foundational doctrine is to America, to Israel, and a desire to expand and export its revolution out to the rest of the world. So the entire world would be under something that's called, well, either a caliphate or an emirate. So this is it's another way of saying that the whole world would submit to Muslim rule. So in furtherance of it's something that's called velayat faqih. The Islamic Republic system is called velayat faqih. So in trying to export that out to the Middle East and the rest of the world, they engaged these proxies like Hamas, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, like Houthis in Yemen, right? And one of the main things that they need to achieve before they can establish this domination is the eradication of Israel, because Israel is the one Jewish state that disrupts the Islamic hegemony in the region, right? How are you gonna bring this entire Islamic region where you have this tiny Jewish state that's a huge problem? So, and just like they say to the United States, because that's a huge problem to expand to the West, right? So their entire objective has been to destroy this Jewish state. That's why they created Hezbollah right on the border of Israel in Lebanon, and they have Hamas in Gaza right on the other border, right? And then you have the Houthis in Yemen, and they're all firing at Israel. And so because the Western world has no idea who the Islamic Republic are and what their objective is, they look at this war in Gaza, which is obviously devastating, it's obviously horrible, so many innocent lives lost, but they don't understand why this is happening. They don't understand that Hamas is intentionally burying itself in civilian populations. They don't understand that this is a war that's very existential, not just for Israel, but for the Middle East and the world.
I'm glad you said that, because you kind of brought it in perspective for me, because it makes sense now why this is such a big issue and why Israel is fighting so hard against this. And I feel like in the West and in America, people are, and in my opinion, they're thinking that Israel will just have this this idea of trying to dominate the region, and they're doing it for nefarious reasons, when what you articulated is very clear to me, that they're trying to surround Israel. And there's been plenty of wars that have been fought proxy, and also Iran and Israel and Syria and Israel and all these wars that have been fought. And it makes sense because they are this little bitty country that's keeping, I guess, this Islamic terrorist group from containing the region, owning the Mediterranean Sea, and having all of that access. And it's interesting that you said that. So with that being said, what's your opinions on America's involvement in Iran? Because I think that we should be helping Israel, and Israel has done their part, and we helped them finish the job because that's in the best interest of us.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, and let me just back up what you're saying. When people say, oh, Israel is some whatever, they think that they want to take over the entire Middle East, whatever, you have to look at Israel's history and see how many times it has engaged in peace treaties with other countries. Like, for example, during the 6-Day War, you had 5 Arab countries declare war on Israel. Again, it's always just defending itself from this constant threat. And then it ends up making peace with Egypt and returning the Sinai. It has peace treaties with the UAE, with other Arab countries, with Bahrain. It's always looking to make peace, except in the instance that it's constantly under attack by multiple actors at the same time, right? People are like, look how many wars Israel has started. Hamas started the war on October 7th. Hezbollah fired next on October 11th. Then come in the Houthis, right? And it's constantly under this barrage of attacks by the primary backer as well, which is the Islamic Republic in Iran. And for some reason, people can't see this. In terms of your question about the US's involvement, look, we haven't even got to this conversation, but the people in Iran are against the regime. Statistically, the overwhelming people, more than 81%, 85% of Iranians are against the regime, and they've been protesting and fighting for freedom for years. For some reason, nobody has anything to say about that because, of course, it's Islamophobic to criticize a regime that's hanging them from cranes. Like, what century are we in? What century are we in that every single day Iranians are being hanged for dissent? This is medieval torture. They're shooting out their eyes. They're being raped. It's so insane that anybody just has nothing to say about that, but they have so much to say about everything else. So there's two different interests when you talk about the US involvement. There's obviously the interests of the US and the Western world, which is to erase this nuclear threat, right? From a regime that's constantly saying to America and to Israel. And from that perspective, Israel has been fighting America's war for a long time by acting as a buffer against all these Islamist jihadist groups, right? Because once Israel's down, obviously America's next. And so I think, in terms of the US's best interest, it's obviously in the best interest of the US to contain that nuclear threat, hands down. And anybody who says otherwise, I mean, at this point, it's just suicidal. In terms of the Iranian interest, because they want to get rid of this regime, their hope, obviously nobody wants war, nobody likes war, it's scary, it's dangerous. But what they hope is that the regime would be so weakened by all of these strikes that they can topple the regime themselves and have, a democratic government in its place.
And that's exactly what I've seen from people that speak on behalf of Iran, because they can't talk. They are state-run media. You better not dissent from the government. So I have seen and heard almost through the grapevine or vicariously through other people that understand what's going on in Iran, is saying that they are actually hopeful that things go south with the government so that they can have or elect the people that they want to be liberated. The crazy thing to me is that all the people in our country, in America, that are crying liberation, 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 they don't want the people of Iran to be liberated. They don't want the women of Iran. I watched a video the other day of a woman, and now I can't verify this because I never lived in Iran, but she was saying that if she were to catch her husband in the act, violating their marriage vows, if you know what I'm saying, and she were to kill her husband, she would be killed, put to death. If he caught her cheating and he killed her, nothing would happen. And she also went through and said that women, if they violate certain crimes, and it's pretty much anybody, but women specifically, if they violate certain crimes and they're guilty and they're sentenced to be hung, that if they're a virgin, they can't hang a virgin. So they have to take advantage of her first, rape her, and then hang her after that. And the barbarism of just thinking about that existence should be enough for people in the West to say, no, I hope to God that we stopped them from getting a nuclear weapon. And I hope that we don't have to fight the war, but I hope that they do have a regime change, which is what Trump said. But I want to hear your thoughts on anti-Semitism, because I used to think that anti-Semitism was like racism, right? And in part, it's like that to a certain degree. I mean, people overuse it, right? Everything is racist, then nothing is racist. Everything is anti-Semitic. But nowadays, I'm starting to see from a lot of conservatives, from a lot of other people who are pundits on television, who are having or displaying what I believe is true anti-Semitism, which is this blind hate for the Jews. So what's your thoughts on anti-Semitism? Do you think it's legit? Do you think there's some there?
Yeah. Oh God, I think so much. I mean, I honestly, when I started speaking up about this on October 7th, I'm such a sort of nuanced and detail-oriented person. I'm not the person that jumps in to say like, oh, racism, this. And so a lot of Jews kept saying to me, this is all about anti-Semitism. And I was like, I'm sure it's not all about anti-Semitism, but the more I dug and dug and dug, I was turning over every single rock, every single stone. And then by 6-7 months in, I was like, oh my God, this is really just all anti-Semitism. And when you look at the patterns throughout history, where we are right now is so scary because it mimics exactly every pattern in history before the worst case scenario. It's the same thing that happened in Nazi Germany. You had this regime that was like, everything is, the fault of the Jews. Everything is the fault of the Jews. And then people rallied behind this regime and it ended up being in World War II. And so now you're seeing a very, very similar trend where we have, the social justice warriors and the humanitarians of our time being so anti-Israel that they're now linking arms with terrorists and jihadists and extremists because they're freedom fighters that are resisting the Jews. And so what we're seeing is exactly what's always happened in all of history. You are now allying with the worst humans on earth because you're so anti-Semitic at this point, and you think that that's why they say it's first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people, right? Because what you do is that you bring these jihadists in by saying, they're freedom fighters, resistance, whatever, and then yeah, they kill the Jews, and guess what? They're going to kill you next too, because they don't care about Christians either, and they don't care about any other religion. So what my primary fear of anti-Semitism is, yes, number one, it is a death cult that seeks to kill Jews, but it's also a death cult that kills us all next. And this is exactly what wokeness has turned into, which is why I call it inclusive terrorism.
Right. I'm glad you said that. You make so much sense. I almost feel like you put this stuff together so well and more eloquently than I can. You are 1,000%. I used to think that anti-Semitism was just blown out of proportion. I'm like, yeah, everything's anti-Semitic. It's not about people. People
Yeah,
cannot like Jews, and there's nothing wrong. People don't like groups, and they have their reasons. But then I started I think it's almost like I say people get bit by the anti-Semite bug. That's what I say, because it
it's a
seems like,
virus.
yeah, it goes down a path, right? It starts with questioning one thing, which is reasonable, right? I mean, it's reasonable to question
Right,
Benjamin Netanyahu. It's reasonable to question
right.
how much money we give Israel and making sure that we're being stewards over the money that our taxpayers are paying. It's reasonable, but it doesn't stop there. It goes from
Exactly.
that to now the Jews run the world. Now the
Hmm.
Jews killed JFK. Now the Jews faked the moon landing. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
before you
yeah.
know it, I heard somebody say the other day that the Jews were responsible for slave trade in Western Africa, like the actual slave trade that brought slaves to America. The Jews ran the
Yeah.
slave trade, and I'm just like, and then it goes down, and then it becomes this lie, because I researched and I wrote an op-ed about it. People were saying the Ashkenazi Jews have no association to the line
The
of Abraham.
Khazarist theory. Yeah.
Right, yeah, the czarist theory, which was a hypothesis and not even really a fact based
Hmm.
research. And there has
Hmm.
been genetic research and studies that have been done in 2010 and 12, and there was a couple of peer review articles that I put in my op-ed that shows very clearly that they do have a lineage back to Abraham, and that it's a little watered down because of the marrying outside of the race and conversions and stuff that came from that region, but they do have a line.
Obviously, yeah.
So to
Of
say that they
course.
don't is the beginning of saying that they're illegitimate, illegitimizing Israel.
Exactly. You're so exactly right. And do you know what I was thinking this today? I was thinking about, I mean, this is going to sound really, just take this how you want it. IQ is a bell curve. Okay, it is a bell curve, and statistically, most people are not highly intelligent people, and highly intelligent people look behind the curtain. They look below the surface, and they start digging, and they start realizing these things. But the problem is, most people don't do that, and so most people are so easy to brainwash because they just take something that's right in front of them and they believe it. And it's really interesting because this book that I'm talking about, it actually outlines all of this and exactly what you're saying as well. Because the pattern throughout history, whether it's, the Marxists, the Soviet Union, Stalin, Lenin, Mao, or Hitler, whoever it is, right? Even Khomeini in Iran, the pattern is that they front as these sort of humanitarians who care about oppressed people. And then they find an enemy, and the enemy is always the Western world. It's always Israel, it's always the United States, it's always the Jews. And they use this scapegoat. And by putting everyone's focus on this scapegoat, look how bad the Jews are. The Jews killed JFK. The Jews did this. The Jews did this. And then they give these conspiracies this legitimacy. And then people start to look at them as the saviors of the oppressed and the truth bearers and all of this stuff. And then suddenly you find yourself in the hands of communists and jihadists, and you have no idea how you got there, but you got there because of that line of anti-Semitism that they dangled in your face, right? So the thing about anti-Semitism, yes, it's racism, it's bad, it's all of that stuff, but it's more than that. It's like a deadly ideology that destroys society because people are so simple-minded that they just go for it.